Welcome to the Korean Atlas and History. Every week, we will take you on a journey throughout the Korean landscape, or back in time through Korea's history. Our topics include mountains, rivers, provinces, cities, holidays, people, and more. Today, on the Korean Atlas and History, South Korean provinces and metropolitan cities, South Korea. South Korea, officially known as the Republic of Korea, was founded as the First Republic, South Korea's first independent government, on August 15, 1948. South Korea shares borders to the north with North Korea along the Korean Demilitarized Zone. Both North Korea and South Korea became members of the United Nations in 1991. Both North Korea and South Korea claim to be the legitimate government of the entire peninsula and adjacent islands. Until the Second World War, the two Koreas lived together as a unified state. In 1910, the Japanese invaded the peninsula and suppressed the Korean people. In the Second World War, the Allied powers of the Soviet Union and the United States fought against Japan and found themselves face to face on the Korean peninsula. The northern zone was occupied by the Soviet Union, and the southern zone was occupied by the United States. By 1948, two separate governments were formed, the Socialist Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the north and the Capitalist Republic of Korea in the south. In the south, Lee Seung-min, an opponent of communism who was backed by the United States, won the first presidential election of the new country in May 1948, beginning the First Republic of South Korea. Lee Seung-min began repressing political opponents inside South Korea, seeking reunification under his control. South Korea requested support from the United States but was denied, while alternatively, North Korea received support from the Soviet Union. On June 25, 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea, starting the Korean War. At this time, the Soviet Union was boycotting the United Nations, thus forfeiting any veto rights they held against UN intervention. Thus, the United Nations became involved in trying to hold the peninsula as a sovereign land under the rule of democracy, while the North tried to control the peninsula with help from the Soviet Union and China. Over a period of 3 years, a civil war raged on the peninsula until July 27, 1953, in which an armistice was signed that returned the boundaries to nearly what they were at the start of the conflict. Lee Seung-min and his Liberal Party government had been in power in South Korea throughout the entirety of the war, but his rule had delivered limited economic and social development in the post-war era. Coupled with his amendments to the Constitution to keep him in power and a reduction of foreign aid from the United States, domestic discontent plagued South Korea. The 1956 election was filled with corruption, and by 1960, protests had begun in the city of Masan. One civilian, Kim Joo-yul, was found dead in the Masan protests, which led to further protests in Seoul. On April 26, 1960, Lee Seung-min stepped down from power and was exiled to Hawaii. The rule of the Liberal Party government came to an end, and South Korea adopted a parliamentary system to remove power from the office of the president. Yoon Boson was elected president on August 13, 1960, but the real power was vested in the Prime Minister, Chang-myeon. This marked the beginning of the Second Republic of South Korea. On May 16, 1961, following months of political instability, General Park Chung-hee and his Democratic-Republican Party launched a coup d'etat, which overthrew the short-lived Second Republic of South Korea and began the Third Republic of South Korea. Park was heavily criticized as a ruthless dictator. On November 21, 1972, Park Chung-hee's government confirmed a new constitution known as the Yushin Constitution, which extended his rule by allowing him to run for an unlimited number of 6-year terms. This began the Fourth Republic of South Korea. Despite Park Chung-hee's harsh authoritarian regime, the Korean economy developed significantly under his tenure. During the Yushin government, one harsh critic was Kim Dae-jung, who pointed out the near-dictatorial powers Park Chung-hee held. Another critic was Kim Young-sam, who called for the ending of U.S. support to the Park dictatorship. Park Chung-hee planned to imprison Kim Young-sam, but the Carter administration of the United States issued a strong warning to President Park not to persecute members of the opposition party. On October 26, 1979, Park Chung-hee was assassinated, and on December 12, 1979, another coup d'etat led by General Jung Do-hwan began, starting the Fifth Republic of South Korea. Jun and his Democratic Justice Party forced the cabinet to expand martial law to the whole nation, closing universities, banning political activities, and curtailing the press, along with expelling Kim Young-sam from the National Assembly and banning him from politics. Nationwide protests began, particularly in the city of Gwangju. One major protest, known as the Gwangju Uprising or the May 18th Democratic Uprising, ran from May 18th to May 27, 1980. Chonam University students who were demonstrating against the martial government were fired upon, killed, raped, and beaten by government troops. The violence climaxed on May 21st when citizens took up arms by robbing local armories and police stations. Bloody fights broke out between civilians and militias, but by May 27th, troops had retaken and subjugated the civilians. In 1980, Jun Do-hwan had Kim Dae-jung arrested on charges of sedition and conspiracy. Kim Dae-jung was sentenced to death, but his sentence was commuted to 20 years in prison after intervention by the United States government and a letter sent by Pope John Paul II to Jun Do-hwan asking for clemency. Kim Dae-jung was later given exile and settled in Boston until returning to South Korea in 1985. Jun Do-hwan and his government held South Korea under despotic rule until 1987, when Seoul National University student Park Jong-chul was tortured to death, and the incident was revealed to the country, beginning the June Democracy Movement. The June Democracy Movement was a group of demonstrations that forced Jun Do-hwan's government to hold elections and other reforms, which led to the end of the Fifth Republic of South Korea. In 1987, No Tae-woo, the leader of the Democratic Justice Party, the same party as Jun Do-hwan, won the presidential election by a narrow margin, beating his opponents Kim Dae-jung and Kim Young-sam, who are both now allowed to participate in elections. No Tae-woo's win began the Sixth Republic of South Korea, which is the current republic under which the country exists. During No's presidency, South Korea hosted the 1988 Olympic Games, as well as becoming a member of the United Nations in 1991. In 1993, Kim Young-sam was elected president, and he had Jun Do-hwan and No Tae-woo arrested and indicted on charges of corruption and treason for their role in military coups. Both were convicted in August 1996. Jun Do-hwan was sentenced to death, and No Tae-woo was sentenced to 17 years in prison. Kim Young-sam also granted amnesty to thousands of political prisoners and removed criminal convictions of pro-democracy protesters who had been arrested during the Gwangju uprising. Kim also started an anti-corruption campaign in order to reform the chaebols, large South Korean conglomerates that dominated the economy. In addition, he advised Bill Clinton not to attack North Korea's nuclear program in order to prevent any fighting. In December 1997, Kim Young-sam, with advice from Kim Dae-jung, pardoned and released both Chun Do-won and No Tae-woo. South Korea moved from what was considered an autocracy to a modern democracy when Kim Dae-jung was elected in 1997. Kim Dae-jung, the former political prisoner who was sentenced to death, had now become president against the backdrop of the 1997 Asian financial crisis. Kim took IMF advice and restructured the South Korean economy, recovering its economic growth. Kim also created the Sunshine Policy of engagement with North Korea, and a North-South summit took place in Pyongyang, North Korea, in 2000. However, these approaches to North Korea proved fruitless. Because of this, in 2007, a member of the Conservative National Assembly and former mayor of Seoul, Lee Myung-bak, was elected president. Although Lee Myung-bak was a conservative president, attacks and tensions escalated between North and South Korea. In November 2010, Yeonpyeong Island was attacked by a North Korean military barrage, with 4 people losing their lives. The lack of a strong response to these attacks stirred the Korean people to anger, and in 2012, another Conservative Party member, Park Geun-hye, of the Korean National Party, was elected president. Park Geun-hye, the daughter of former president and coup leader Park Chung-hee, was the first female president to assume office in South Korea. With her close friend Chae Soon-sil involved in state affairs, her administration was formally accused of corruption, bribery, and influence peddling. This was followed by a series of massive public demonstrations, and she was removed from office in November 2016. She is currently sentenced to 24 years in prison. On May 10, 2017, Moon Jae-in assumed office as president. So far, he has improved relationships with North Korea and successfully hosted the 2017-2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang. Nowadays, a joke has been circulating around South Korea that all the presidents go to jail, and this couldn't ring more true when Lee Myung-bak was detained on March 22, 2018 on charges of receiving 11 billion Korean won, or about $10 million in bribes, as well as slush funds worth 35 billion won, or approximately $33 million. He faced other charges as well, and on October 5, 2018, he was convicted on charges of bribery, embezzlement, and abuse of power. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison in order to pay 13 billion won, or $11.5 million, in fines. The geography of South Korea is mountainous, flanked by the Yellow Sea to the west and the Sea of Japan or East Sea to the east. The highest point is Mount Hallasan on Jeju Island, standing 1,950 meters or 6,400 feet above sea level. The longest river is the Nakdong River at 510 kilometers. South Korea's administrative divisions are organized into 8 provinces, 1 special self-governing province, 6 metropolitan cities, 1 special city, and 1 metropolitan autonomous city. The 8 provinces include Gyeonggi-do, Gangwon-do, Chungcheongbuk-do, Chungcheongnam-do, Jeollabuk-do, Jeollanam-do, Gyeongsang-buk-do, and Gyeongsangnam-do. The special self-governing province is Jeju-Tukbyol-jachi-do. The 6 metropolitan cities include Busan Gwangyok시, Daegu Gwangyok시, Incheon Gwangyok시, Gwangju Gwangyok시, Daejeon Gwangyok시, and Ulsan Gwangyok시. The special city is Seoul Tukbyol시, and the metropolitan autonomous city is Sejong Tukbyoljachishi. South Korea has been titled the Land of the Morning Calm because of its spellbinding natural beauty of picturesque high mountains, clear waters, and splendid tranquility. This tranquility is most clearly seen in the morning as the sun rises over the beautiful land. We hope you have enjoyed the Korean Atlas and History. If you want to learn more or study the Korean names of these places, check out our Memrise tool. That's MEMRISE.com and search for Korean Atlas and History. If you wish to download all the episodes of this podcast, want more information, or want transcripts of this podcast, visit us at www.koreanatlasandhistory.com. If you wish to send us an email, you can email us at koreanatlasandhistory@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.